All right, good morning. I have been thinking about doing this for a long time. I've been thinking about making some sort of intro to Unix or intro to Linux, merely because the people who have I've been interacting with in the Fedi have some people, there's a lot of people who are power users, but some people have been complaining about how difficult it is to use Linux and how frustrating it is to get up to speed with the Unix concepts. So I wanted to make this short little video just as an introduction. I want to make a few others as well, just to give an intro to Unix because I'm trying really hard to increase my output for people's computer literacy. And I think if I can just make some basic videos for PeerTube and just stick them on Diode.zone or whatever, then I think that'll help people. The main issue we have is I run Emacs as my window manager, and it'll take hours, and already you can see the pain and frustration that people have with Unix in order to get a normal looking system working. I guess I could boot into Mate here because I think I stripped all that stuff out of my Geeks config. Yeah, so I run Geeks as my package manager and as my system distribution. All these things will become clear later on, I suppose, as people ask questions and these terms get further defined and better explained as things go on. But all I wanted to do in this episode, very, very simply, is show you all, as you can see the mouse, is show you all how to use the shell. And I've got the Linux cookbook here open next to me. And I suppose some people already are going to be screaming, "You're using Linux and not BSD. It's not part of the tradition of Unix and stuff." And it's like, yes, that's absolutely true. What is the history of Linux? I'm absolutely not going to explain it to you in this video because I think that'll turn people off. And a lot of the things I'm going to be explaining to you might not make a lot of sense at first, but hopefully as time goes on and I make more of these videos and we just painfully, horribly, atrociously blunder our way through life with Linux, these things should hopefully fall into place and you will learn to hate yourself as much as I do. No, that's not true. I'm quite happy with myself and I rather like Geeks and it's very good. So what is the shell? What is the shell? What is Why do we have the shell? Why does it exist? And it's a part of the Linux or the Unix ecosystem. So down the bottom, you can see here that I'm using, don't worry about those pop-ups. You can see here that I'm using eShell, which is inside Emacs. And so I recommend that you don't get started with Emacs first. Open up any shell that you feel like opening up. It's sometimes called a terminal. You can open it up in a thing called Xterm, or you can open up the GNOME shell if you're running the GNOME desktop environment. How do I know what desktop environment I'm running? You may be screaming at me. I can't answer that question right now without looking at your computer screen straight away. Just assume somehow, through force of habit or force of just mere struggling against life itself, you have opened up a shell. It's usually not that hard to get opened. If just click around all the different menus in your desktop environment, you should be able to find a shell. And not only that, you should be able to find a shell on Windows as well. But we will forever curse and spurn Windows. So what can you do in the shell? You can type. You can go hello and do a little exclamation mark. I have a font set on my shell. One of the basic ways you can check to see if you've actually got a good font is if you type 1IL and I don't know, capital L, and see how they all look different. It means that you'll be able to tell what you're looking at. Some fonts in the shell make an I and a 1 look very similar, or like a capital I and a 1 look very similar, but in this shell font I think it's pretty good and it looks like handwriting, so it's I feel like it's nice and friendly and familiar. So what are we looking at here? What's actually happening? Well, this little squiggle, or this little tilde, as it's more appropriately known, I can highlight it here, is tells me that I'm in my home directory. And if you want to find out what directory you're in or where you are, if it doesn't display it for you, type in pwd, and that stands for print working directory. And as you can see here, it says home vidak. And that's my home directory. And if we want to find out more about what's going on inside the home directory, you can type ls. That stands for list, and you can see all these horribly badly organized files. So please, for the life of me, don't ever organize your files badly. It's a really bad idea. Organize your files nicely, like I have definitely not. So we can go to CD. We can change directories, and that we can do that by typing in CD. And I know that there's one called hobbies. You can list the hobbies here. There's all sorts of things, and then we can press clear, and that'll clear all those things. So those are some basic commands that you can learn. So pwd, print working directory, and as you can see, it tells you. I'll use the mouse actually instead of pointing with my finger because you can't see that. There's home, vidak, hobbies. And so this is an important concept to learn when you're learning Unix. There's things called files and there's things called directories. And you can list the directories by typing in lsd. Yeah, that didn't work. But you can type in lsd and then start. And that'll tell you all the directories that are there. Actually, that didn't work either. What is my life? So we've got ls. So ls will list all the files, and you can see I've got lots of different. So blue stands for on my system at least, blue stands for folders, and black text here stands for different files. And then the different colors here, like vmu.zip, that's a zip file, and yeah, you can open zip files in much the same way that you would in a desktop environment on Linux, in the same way on Windows. But then you've got some different file extensions, and we'll get to file extensions later when we talk about files and file systems. All I'm trying to teach you now is some basic shell commands that'll help you move around. So if you want to go back to your home directory, just merely type cd. Isn't it magic? It's amazing. And if you want to go up a directory, you type in cd ... So that's a convention. That's a convention that we use in Unix or Linux to tell the thing tell the computer to move up a directory. And so yeah, so we've moved up a directory now, and as you can see, because we're not in the home directory anymore, so that was the tilde, we're back in a higher directory. And as you can see, we've got some other directories inside the home directory here. But let's go back to vidak. One thing that you should definitely learn is about the root directory. And so let's list that here. The root directory is just a simple slash. And the important concept that I suppose I want you to take away from this is that Unix uses a hierarchical file system. And I think there's a little yeah, I think there's a file, a little executable we can run called tr. Let's type it so that we see what's going on. So it's the correct one. No, that's translate. Let's not do that. Maybe there's tree. Tree is not a so we can't list things in terms of trees. How can I get this concept across easily? So we'll type in ls block maybe. So this is kind of what you'll get when you want to look at the different block devices on your computer. So you've got SDA, that's the name of a disk, and you've got SDB here, which is another disk, and then you have partitions within the disk. And so these partitions get mounted to mount points. And if this is going way too fast for you, I apologize profusely, but let's push on. So a hierarchical file system has folders, and you can have folders inside folders, but then eventually when you want to understand what's at the base of everything, where do these turtles stop? Well, they stop at the root directory. And the root directory can be found by typing in cd with just a simple slash. So this tells you we want to go to the very top of the file hierarchy, top of the file system hierarchy. So let's do that. So now we're here. So as you can see, it's told us that we're in the root of the file system, and we're this little $sign, which I haven't explained yet, which I probably should explain, tells us that we're in user mode. We're not in the super user mode, but we'll worry about that later. let's list what's in the top of the file system hierarchy. And as you can see, you have lots of different folders. So let's list them in a way that is nice and organized. Now this is probably more what I'm trying to get at. As you can see at the top, this tells you that you can operate on the file, it's the folder inside itself, that little dot, and then you have a dot, which isn't theoretically, actionable because there's no further way. I'm just about to burp. Sorry, guys. Please forgive me. One of the problems of like recording and live casting and talking constantly is you take in air and the air can end up in your stomach. Anyway, I'm going to delete that bit. So we have bin, which stands for binary, boot, which is where you put your boot devices or your boot scripts and boot executables. You have dev, which is your block devices, or the different devices that are organized. And one of the cool things about Unix is that everything theoretically and hopefully is a file. That's one of the really powerful things about the shell and about Unix. And it means that when you want to interrogate your system, you're either looking at plain text, like a character device, for instance, or you're looking at a block device, and a block device is merely just the ones and zeros. And so you might know a block device is something like, say, an executable. And so you can't actually interrogate an executable in terms of text because it's been compiled. It's been transformed from its code into something that the machine understands. And that's another really important concept. So let's look inside dev. Let's do that. Actually, that was terrible. Let's go back to the prompt. cd dev. All right, what's inside cd dev? Let's have a look. So ls will list what's inside dev. And so I encourage you to interrogate your system using cd and dev. And as you can see, there's lots of complex pink files here. And you don't need to understand what all this stuff is. You just need to know that files are inside folders, and files can be either character devices or block devices. And so this is a really cool way of looking at the way things work. So what else can we see here? So let's look inside CPU. Let's have a look here. So I've put the cursor, which is something that you can do in eShell, next to the CPU folder. How do we know it's a folder? Well, let's type in a more complex command. One thing you can do in order to understand the ways you can transform the output from ls is to type in ls help. And when you type in ls help, it tells you everything that you can do. So lsa, so that's a good little pipe or tap to put onto your ls command. And ls all is something I like to do, and then L means a long listing format, and this will help us understand a little bit more about the output or the contents of a folder or directory. So let's type in ls tap al. You don't have to type in the tap every time, but you can just make sure it's separated by a white space, and yeah, we just got a massive output. So some of these folder contents are links, and they'll have a little L next to them. Some of them will have a little D here. As you can see, that stands for directory, and these are the permissions. You don't need to know much about it yet, but if you start seeing X's in your permissions, it means that little folder allows executing or can be used or can be executed itself. Hopefully I'm correct about that. But anyway, let's go into the CPU directory like this. So cd CPU. And then we'll have a look inside. Generally speaking, there's a separation between changing to a directory and viewing inside a directory, sorry. When you're using a graphical file browser or file system explorer or file system, when using a graphical file system viewer, you'll be able to see the contents of the folder straight away because it uses a different set of concepts. So we have to list what's inside CPU to have a look. And then you see there's a folder or a little object here or a little block device called microcode. So let's interrogate that. Yeah. So we can't really do much with microcode. I'm not gonna touch anything further. We've already gone into some fairly cursed um, uh, uh, places inside the system. So let's go back to the root directory. So the root directory, like I said before, contains the whole file system in toto. And you'll be able to find the mount points, for instance, under MNT, ls. So as you can see, LFS, I think that comes from Linux from scratch when I was working before. Geeks has a different way of organizing these system directories. But don't worry, this is fairly standard here. So you have var, which I think stands for variables, USR, which stands for user, TMP, which stands for temp. If you want to decompress files, you can put them into temp, and I think what happens when you restart the system is that that directory gets cleared. Sys stands for system, run stands for run, and I think that will, or RUN stands for run, and I think that's where a lot of the processes get put in your system as files. Root is where the super user will put all of its files. Proc is another place to find processes. MNT is usually on a Debian system. Don't worry if that doesn't make any sense. On a Debian system, we'll put its mount points. So as we saw with ls block before, we can see where our mount points are. And you can see that with this tiny little 0.5 terabyte hard drive that I have here, this disk, we have the GNU store. And that is where the package manager puts all of its special transactionally managed packages. Lost and found, you can ignore that. Media, that's where a lot of the temporarily mounted USBs will go. You've got home, and that's where we found our home directory before. GNU, like we said before, GNU is where you'll find all the different transactionally managed packages, etc. That's where you put a lot of your system configuration. That's a very important thing to understand. And then dev, which we went into before, is where all the block devices were. It's where we treat the hardware as files. And that's a really cool part of the UNIX system. Boot, let's have a look inside boot, actually. I'll show you what I'm talking about. You'll see EFI and grub. And grub is the bootloader, and EFI is the special cursed code that the Intel systems that we use for our personal computers put their secret shit, and that we have to, you know, dodge and duck and weave in order to make sure our systems work. So let's go into let's do something more complex. In order to go up a directory and then down again, what you can do is you can type ... like we said earlier in this video. ... will take you up a directory, but you can actually chain these commands, which is cool. So let's go back into boot. You can do ... bin, and that'll take you up the directory structure and then down again into bin. We'll get into the last thing I think I'll show you, because this video is getting on in length, is how to autocomplete commands. So we'll just press enter for now because we know that this is a correct directory to work. So let's do ls bin, and then there's sh, which is the executable that runs the shell, and that is probably symlinked to bash somewhere. Yeah, and it is. So as you can see, there's a hash here, hash for the different transactional changes that the computer manages for me, and then bash, and then the version, and then that gets linked to bin.sh. That stands for born again shell. Born again shell is like your most basic, well, not most basic, but the most commonly used shell that you'll come across. If you use a BSD system, for instance, you might be using a different shell, or you might be using bash as well. It doesn't matter at this stage. So let's go back to the home directory. So let's learn how to autocomplete. So let's list the whole directory again. I'll try and take you up to some interesting things. So let's try and find. So yeah, the Ohio Players. So this is I Want to Be Free. So there's this song here. It's an Opus file. It's a little audio file that we can open. or we can do Victor Mono All. In fact, I think Victor Mono All, this is a font zip file. So let's open up this with file completion. So you can go, let's use the ls command in this. Sorry, you probably couldn't see that. Let's use the ls command for this region. So lsv, and we press tab. And if you press tab, up comes the single completion that we had, which was Victor Mono All. And as you can see, you can type in more letters, vi, but if you type in letters that don't match to anything, you'll get a little, scream at you from the terminal saying, no, there's nothing here that can be completed. So luckily, the capital V that we have shows us everything that single file has. I think I might leave it here. I'm gonna have to. Actually, I think I might just. I'm just gonna upload this video as it is, mainly just because editing video is just tiresome and frustrating and tedious. So yeah, see how we go. Thank you very much for watching my extremely cursed intro to Unix, in which we used like 3 commands, which was pwd, tells you the print working directory. We use cd, which is change directory, and we use ls. Yeah, so we can go lsa, that tells you all, and then lsal, which is what I like to use. Sometimes people do la. It doesn't matter what order you do it in. Will tell you all the file attributes. And I'll just run through this quickly now, just so we, for the sake of completion. These are the different users. This is the column for users, and this is the column for groups. This should be a fairly common concept that you have from using Windows anyway, because when you sign into a system, for instance, you have to have a user and a password, and that user will belong to groups that have permissions. So most of these files here are owned by vidak and are owned by the group users. But then we have some crazy stuff like root, and root is the super user, and that uses the group root and the user root, and that's, for some reason, that there's a file here that's owned by root called wget-list. Why does that exist? As you move forward in your understanding of Linux, you will learn just how terrible you are at using Linux. Even myself today, like, I still make massive mistakes. So yeah, hopefully this self-deprecating humor went off well.